Hi, in this video you learn how to make a buttonhole and to sew on a button. There will be two different techniques on how to make the buttonhole. Here we have a pocket and I'm marking the middle where we're going to start our buttonhole. I'm using a friction pen which dissolves with heat or washes out. If you mark this with chalk, you're fine, but don't do that with a permanent marker, even with a pencil. I'm marking left and right 1 millimeter away from the button. I have my little lines. I'm drawing the length of the buttonhole and extending the beginning and the end of the buttonhole so I can see that when I'm placing my presser foot on the pocket. Next step is to mark where your button is going to be. And in this case, we mark it in the middle of the buttonhole. If you would do a shirt, you would do that on the top of the buttonhole. This is where the button will be sitting. Now we're going to the machine. In this video you will see two different techniques on how to make a buttonhole. One automatic with this foot. Some other companies like Pfaff or Benina have different feet and their mechanisms work differently. With this one you place the button in the back. The manual buttonhole foot you will see after we made the buttonhole with this one. You take your button, you put it at the end of your buttonhole foot, which automatically sets the length of your buttonhole. The slider is what you're going to put into your interchangeable shank. It just clicks in, there's a release button at the end to take it off again, and you just clip that on. Now make sure that you have your threads going underneath the foot. This ensures that you don't have any tangles within your buttonhole. As you can see, you have a little bit difficulties here. Now, I'm going to select the buttonhole, if I press the right button. So in this case it's number 16. I need to pull down the lever that goes between the two markers. And the prongs on the presser foot will change the steps in the program of the buttonhole. Now I'm placing my fabric underneath. I make sure that the front line lines up with the spot where my needle is. So where the needle comes down, that's where the line is going to be and our tag will be created. With the electronic machine, it's pretty straightforward. You put the material in, you lean back, you relax, you step on the pedal, the foot pedal that is, and the machine does all the stitching. So as you can see, if I get this correctly, there was the Bartek a few stitches. Now we're going on the left hand side with the first part of the buttonhole. This machine stitches forward and then goes backwards again with the right side. The next step will be to create the Bartek at the end, and then there will be a few stitches to secure the thread. And your buttonhole is done. Now this one is the manual buttonhole foot, which means you need to do several different steps in order to get your buttonhole done. Again, you put the foot on, and then you place your material underneath that foot. In this case, again, you make sure the buttonhole foot is pushed all the way to the back. The needle sits where your line is. And then what I do, I look for the setting there. The 2 and 4 is the bar tack, so I make 3 stitches. And the length of the buttonhole you need to set appropriately for the material as well. As I said, it's just 3 stitches. Then I'm looking which one is the one that goes backwards. That's number 3. Which is funny because number 1 goes forward, so it does make sense. Now, we're going backwards. And sometimes I like to support the fabric a little bit with these machines, because the feet usually don't have that much grip. Now, we are now at 2.5 centimeters, so the bars on the side are 5 millimeters. We're changing to 2 and 4, which does our bar tack at the end. And we do 7 stitches, which means actually 14. It's 7 bars. Then we change again with the needle up. Now we're going to 1. And the reason why we do this, if you do it the other way around, you might miss the bar tack at the end, and your buttonhole will be a little bit longer on one side than on the other. But this way, you can't go any further than your bar tack in the front. Now you change that, and you see I have my needle still in. So again, we do 7 stitches there, but this time, and I left the needle in this position, so I need to get it out of there, change it over to number 3 instead of 1, and then I'm doing a few more stitches, which finishes and locks the thread. And with that, we have the buttonhole done for our mechanical buttonhole, the 4-step buttonhole. Now we're cutting the threads of our buttonhole. As you can see, it came out really nicely. Now the next step is to cut the buttonhole open. What we do with a sharp pair of scissors or snips, or even with your seam ripper, we start right next to the bar tack and go towards the middle. Make sure that you don't cut the threads along the buttonhole. It might be a little bit hard at first, but your scissors will do the trick, or your seam ripper. Just make sure when you use a seam ripper to start from either end, go to the middle, and then turn around like I'm doing here and cut the rest open towards the middle again. Cut the loose threads from your buttonhole to make it nice and clean. And there you go, your buttonhole is done. The next step is to thread your needle to stitch on the button. What I'm doing here is a tailor's knot, so you wet your fingers and you twist the thread around your index finger once, and then you roll it off with your thumb. That gives you a few tiny little knots that go together into one. You can cut the end off. And then we're trying to thread the needle. Here it looks as if I'm having luck, but trust me, it took me 5 minutes. So what we do now, we have the double thread through. We put our needle through that loop and then pull at the end. What that does, it creates a knot at the end, which also puts both threads onto the same tension. That way you don't have one longer, one shorter, and you have unsightly loops. We take our piece of fabric where we're going to put the button, and we stitch from the front into it, towards the back. And we're not going directly in the middle, we're going about 1 millimeter to the left or the right, and then from the back we do the same thing. That way we have the stitches coming out at the same width of the holes in the button. If you're too far over, just pull your needle out and try it again, so you get the same distance there. Now before you pull this all the way through, make sure that you go through the 2 threads again. That way you trap the knot and you also trap the thread. Now we put our button next to the stitches. We go through our thread and now we make sure that we are even on both sides. We take our button, go through one hole from the back, push the needle through, pull the thread all the way, go to the back. Now with the button on the needle, go through the back of the piece of fabric, and now pull the thread out. Make sure that your stitches aren't tangled. And now we continue the whole thing. Again, we go through the hole on the top. We're going in through the lower hole, through the fabric. Sometimes it's a bit hard. There you go. And then we do that about 5 times. 5 times is usually a really nice, thick bar tack. You could do this, by the way, with your sewing machine. With number 2 and 4, what you've seen during the buttonhole, the bar tack, you would be doing that with the button underneath. Just make sure it lines properly up. And if you're lucky, you have a special foot for sewing on buttons and you can spare yourself that. However, I prefer my buttons to be hand sewn. Now we go through the button one more time, just to make sure it looks nice. This looks a little bit thin. And when we come out of the back there, I'm going through the stitches to secure my thread. Then I'm wrapping around the 2 legs underneath about 5 to 7 times. It depends on the thickness of the button as well as how long of a stand you want. Then I'm going through the 2 stems of thread again, push my needle through, But now, instead of pulling it all the way through, like in crochet, I'm making a loop, I'm pulling the thread through, pulling it tight, and again, pull the thread through, pulling it tight, and then after the third time, I'm just pushing my needle through, pull that tight, and we have a triple knot at the end. You cut that off, and your button is on. This will also make it much easier for you to close your button and buttonhole. And at the other side, it is really neat because you just have one point there where all the threads go through, and your button is lifted from the fabric, as you can see here a little bit. I think my fingers were a little bit too thick. And that's how it looks when it's finished. Enjoy.